Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Hello, this is episode number 53 of So There I Was, which is how all great aviation tales begin. This is titled Burial at Sea, Not So Fast.
Oh, he was just out for a swim. He'd be back. Another great story was Slaf Sr.
My gosh, right?
Yeah, he talks about how they lost the XO at sea and held a burial at sea for him.
Yeah, well, he was gone long enough. They figured he was done for.
Right.
But not so fast.
Turned up 4 days later. Great story how he turned up.
Story.
So
Slaf Sr. did not disappoint. The stories just kept... These guys from that era have such great stories because they tell it with such nonchalance. And you and I are both palms sweating.
The number of airplanes they lost, the number of pilots they lost, the danger that they faced on a daily basis. And, you know, they were young and bulletproof. They didn't care. They got to fly cool, fast jets, and life was good.
How about the description of landing on a straight deck carrier with an LSO at night wearing basically Christmas lights
all over his arms and legs to give signals so you could see him? Yeah. And he was the man. He was not just a safety officer. He was in charge. He had to follow it.
I shut down after that. I just completely shut down. I thought, nope, yeah, no.
Glad I didn't ever have to do that.
I don't know that I could. I don't think I could have done that. That's crazy. And those guys did that every day. Yep. Every day.
Flying the straight deck carrier. Then he got out and he went to the Indiana Air National Guard and he flew the F-84 Thunderstreak. And they were not impressed with his Marine Corps hat.
No. As a matter of fact, it became a indicator of power, and they took care of that.
Yep. They took his hat and they burned it. So, and then another great story, Slaf Jr. was on the show back around episode 50 or 51, somewhere in there. Slaf Jr. was with us, and he talks about the night Slaf Jr. was born. They reached out to the state police to find him, and the state police found him how?
Yeah. Via a very popular disc jockey.
Yep.
They got a hold of him via a disc jockey.
Yep.
Who was an Air National Guard
the message
guy.
Across the state, got to a radio disc jockey who told him over the radio, Captain Schlafly, it's an emergency. Call your wife. Yeah.
Yes. What a great story that is.
Right? Well, this is an emergency. This is episode 53. Sit back, relax. Make sure you're not sitting on what?
Don't sit on the ejection handle.
In the world's smallest cockpit.
Comes episode 53.
On the tanker. Through the weather. Oh, and to the tanker crew who did that. Thanks a lot. We really appreciated that. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. Well, there I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fun.
So there I was, 21 years old. I'm on an airplane for the first time, leaving Chicago, thunderstorms outside of Pensacola. We land in Mobile and have to be bused to our home away from home, arriving at 3 a.m. and expected for calisthenics at 4:30.
Okay.
So anyhow, I think that we can come back to the Banshee some. It was a great airplane, a very only thing that I can say I probably did 500 Immelmans on it because of the special delivery. And low level, we did lots and lots of low level. We had one other mishap on the Lake Champlain that was very interesting. So there my roommate was flying with his exec on the F9, F8s and flying between two levels of clouds and has a midair with an Italian F-86.
Oh.
So it was our roommate was flying number 2 on him. So all of a sudden he just saw a flash. But he did see one chute going down through the lower coverage, and it was a colored chute, a colored pattern shirt, and we didn't have those. We had white shirts.
Okay.
So we thought the exec was gone. So we came back and we looked for him. I mean, I wasn't on the flight, but we looked for him for a couple of days, and then we declared him missing in action and had a burial at sea. And 4 days later, he shows up on an island off of Italy.
Beautiful.
And he comes back
Awesome.
to tell the story.
How was my funeral, boys?
No, it started something like this, guys. So there I was, no airplane, nothing but my seat.
Oh,
So we woke up in the seat, and it was separated from the airplane. And all he could think about as he told the story is that he was at 20,000 feet, and he didn't want to pull his chute and freeze to death or lose his oxygen or something. So he just delayed pulling his chute, and he was already in the soup and came out fairly low. He pulled his chute, landed, and had a couple of high intensity mistakes there. We had these knives. You probably had them too, with the blade that'll cut the
shroud cutter.
Little hook blade,
Yeah,
shroud.
shroud cutter.
He pulled that out, and he promptly cut his lifeboat away. The little single man lifeboat away. So, but anyhow, he got it back, but he cut off the water supply and whatever he had. So he ended up in a lifeboat, floating free. He said he saw us, some people looking for him a couple of times, but to make a good story short, he drifted up on an island that had some lights on it. He pulled himself up through the surf, and he got onto a levee and got up to this house, and he knocked on the door, and the only word of Italian he knew was orange, because we were buying these blood oranges, over there. And and they weren't going to let him in. So they let him in. He calls. We fly him back to the boat. He tells us the story. He quit flying because he thinks he used up all his luck. Yeah. And he probably did.
So
Right.
So the midair took place in IMC, and it was an interloper. Just happened to be an Italian interloper that he had a mid.
I think they were on an intercept.
Mission.
It was a hot intercept.
It was a hot intercept, and it was not very well controlled.
Oh my God!
I don't think the Italian was supposed to be there, but anyhow, that was another loss that we almost had, but we did. So let's go on and find out how the F9 tried to kill me. Yeah. I guess I already told you that inverted spin was basically it. But F9 squadron, we got back, and your listener that wondered about his dad, his dad was actually in my flight school class.
Okay.
Are you kidding me?
Yes.
So that was.
So I knew who he
McCoy
was. Ken
name.
McCoy was in my flight school class.
Okay.
But we had about, out of that 50, we lost quite a few getting through, but maybe we had 30 or so that got their wings and got their assignments. But Ken went west and I went east. And once the guys went west, we lost track of them until 40 years later, we started having flight school class reunions. And we got a group of those guys that went to the East Coast, got together with those of us that went to the West Coast. And we had about 4 or 5 years of reunions. And that was quite interesting because we got to know what those guys did.
Sure. That sounds like a lot of fun. And just for a point of reference, folks, if you'll go to the website, sothereiwas.us, and between episodes 43 and 44, there is not a podcast episode, but I did put a posting up with some articles about Ken McCoy. He punched out of an A4 off of Hawaii, and there are several newspaper articles and a write-up from his son talking about this, and that's to whom we are referring here as Ken McCoy.
Right. So I really never saw Ken again after we left flight school, but he must have done the same thing I did, and he got vetted and got into the Marine Corps.
Right, yeah. And then what was kind of neat was last week, Ken's son sent me a Smug Mug compilation of several photos, which I then shared here with Slaf. And any of those photos bring up any particular memories or anything like that? For instance, I looked at it and am laughing that 60 years later, the front gate at Pensacola looks almost identical. Obviously, there's more concrete barriers and that sort of thing to prevent terrorism these days than there were in the 50s.
Yeah,
but,
that's right. And I just wondered, so there I was,
right,
70 years ago or 60 years ago, whatever it was, in that bar, which is over, if you're facing the gate, it's over the left side.
Yes.
And that bar was there. And as soon as we got out of pre-flight, we got to go outside the gate. I mean, it never got to do that very much. And we go outside the gate and we get as far as that bar. And I remember in detail that gate after I came out of the bar for the happy hour where they offered 5 martinis for one.
Nice. Beautiful.
Yeah, I almost didn't get back.
Right?
That's the closest I came. I wasn't even in a car.
That sounds like a message that's a disaster message. That's not good. 5 for 1.
5 for 1. That's right. They're all lined up in front of you. So let's go into the getting back. Honey, we were just married when we left, and we come back and we settle in. And what am I going to do next? And all of a sudden, 3 or 4 of us discover we get grandfathered into the new squadron. So we dump the Banshees, although 6 of them are now back on the carrier in the med for that exercise, which I opted out. My friend Satch went, and he picked up a few more night landings there. And we got rid of the Banshees and got F9s. And so I was in the squadron at a time we had a great skipper. He was a World War II ace in Mariana Turkish route, and bunch of neat guys. We had a guy who was ops officer in the squadron who was, I don't know if you guys still get the history of Marine Corps aviation in World War II when you get into the Marine Corps and you get your wings. Did you ever see that book?
I don't recall that book specifically. No.
Okay. Anyhow, in that book, right in the middle, there's a picture of a second lieutenant Marine by his Corsair holding on to a Corsair with a prop chopped about halfway off, a couple of blades of the prop in the basic story. And Bob Klingman was his name, and he had fuel and ammunition, but he couldn't get high enough to shoot down a Jenny that he was chasing. So he shot all his ammo out to make the airplane light and climbed up and chopped the tail off with his prop. And so that's part of the history of the Corsair guy in World War II.
Wow.
He also
he took an airplane out with his prop.
Right.
That is amazing.
But he was also the guy. All of us Marines always have watched the movie Bridges of Tokyo-ri, right?
Yeah.
Everybody watched that.
Yeah.
So remember that shot in the movie where they have a real shot of they called it a Banshee, but it was an F9. Oh, there's some pictures there.
Hey, look at that.
That's it.
That is amazing.
So if you remember Bridges of Tokyo-ri, there's a shot where he's supposed to be shot up a little bit, and he comes back and he hits the round down, and the airplane breaks right in half and burns. Remember that shot?
Yes. Yep.
Bob Klingman was flying that airplane. He was the same guy. And he says, I said, how did you get out? But if you watch that, and I have it in my presentation I give, if you watch it, you see how the engine breaks loose and it flies up over the cockpit. And that's where all of the flame is, the engine and the fuel tank that flies over there.
Yeah.
And the cockpit turns over and then it comes up. And if you watch really close, you can see the guy still in there. He says he just unstrapped and walked out of that.
Get out of here. And it's the same pilot. It's
the same guy. Yeah.
It's the same.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
Wow.
And I asked him a number of times. He was my boss. I was flight officer in the squadron. He was my boss. And I asked him, I said, how did you do that? He says, just horseshit luck.
Oh my gosh.
Anyhow, so there I was.
Holy cow.
I'm not sure if you want to fly with that guy or not want to fly with that guy.
Anyhow, so here's the new squadron, and we get our.
So the F9s, that's the Cougar.
That's the Cougar,
and it's got a pretty swept wing.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does, and it has flaperons versus
Ailerons.
Ailerons.
Yeah. So did that affect the roll? I mean, did it?
As a nasty characteristic, if you're going to fly it off of a carrier, is that you rotate around the wingtip. You don't rotate around the center line of the airplane. So if you got into a situation where you had to do a lot of correction, you may walk your airplane down in altitude, and you have to watch that.
Yeah, because it's spoil and lift every time.
It's spoil and lift every time you do.
Every time you roll.
And I imagine the adverse yaw was just treacherous.
Yeah. The Cougar was a Grumman tank, a very solid platform, both for special weapons, low level. We used to run our low levels in the Cougars at 360, and the Banshees we ran it at 300, just because it's easy to calculate the miles per minute, either 5 or 6. But the Cougar would run into its Immelman turn and bomb delivery at 426. And that's about as fast as we could get it going with all that stuff on it. So we got into the squadron, and we got the new guys.
Now, was this at Cherry Point still?
Yeah. Okay. Same squadron.
You just got new
533. Airplane. Yeah, didn't even have to remember what squadron I was in. Just new airplanes and all new pilots, except there was 4 of us, I think, that
stayed. That just stayed.
That stayed. I got the best job in the squadron, flight officer. I told everybody where they went and where they could fly, and
nice.
That's what you like to do.
Yeah. And what years were you in 533, sir? 533
from 56 to 58. 6, 7, 8.
Okay.
Two tours, and I was out. They were almost done with the tour when I got out of the service and went back to school. So, how about one little quickie before we leave the gun squadron here? So we had all these new kids in the squadron, and I was, of course, the big kid on the block now. I knew my way around and knew where to go.
Yeah, you're the old salt.
The old salt. So when I was introduced into 533 in the Banshees, I got 2 rides with one of the squadron guys to show me around in a T-33, TV2. So we went out, and what they really wanted to show us, we're never going to get any instruction in low levels or anything. He wanted to show me the low level patterns and roughly what it's like and what to watch out for and that kind of stuff. So we were out on this first one. That's really a lot of fun flying that. We used to fly our low levels down around 100 feet. And we used to have a chase plane that would stay at 100 or 150 and make sure you stayed down there. But anyhow, we went out, and he'd taken me around, showing me around. A good guy who's our LSO, and I know him to this day. So we went out, and we had a bit of not much of an overcast, so it was pretty easy to see. And so he takes me out over the beach. He says, "What's that?" And that's what I'm supposed to know it. So I looked down, and I went, "Man, looks like a beach," and that kind of thing. He says, "That's Kitty Hawk, and you should know because that's where airplanes come from. That's the home of the airplane." And okay, so I learned that. Okay, now go forward a year and a lot of experience, and a lot of cockiness. And I got 3 new guys, and I'm going to take them out on a 4-plane and show them around. See, okay.
Sure. Yeah.
So we do another neat thing about Cherry Point. You can make 4-plane takeoffs easy. I mean, we did it all the time because that runway is 200 feet wide. I got them out there and showing them around, and didn't do any low level with them. But I said, okay, you guys get in trail. But there was about a 3,000, 2,000 foot broken below me, right about where I was going. So I was aiming for Kitty Hawk, and I was going to ask these guys. So I said, you guys just get in trail and stay above me. Don't go below me. So I get it, and I see it through the clouds, and I roll over and I go through a little hole and see a Kitty Hawk right there, and I look out to sea, and about half a mile out to sea, there's a submarine just coming up out of the water, just coming up. So I pulled my nose up and I ran right at that submarine, and I never said anything about Kitty Hawk. And it came back and said, how the hell did you see that submarine? And I never told them.
Hey, listen, I can't give you all the secrets right now, boys, but when you're as experienced as I am, you just see submarines.
Know where they are. That's right. It's better to be lucky than good.
Oh, that's great.
Okay. So that was the Kitty Hawk story. And you've had the inverted high-speed stall, but high-speed stalls were good. When I left the squadron, there was one of those kids that had come in. He was a little difficult, but he killed himself on a break. And I bet you I looked at that and I said, all he'd have to do is to get a little rambunctious on a break, and you could get into that inverted stall. It would go through the burble just like that. Had to be careful. Anyhow, later in the tour, we had a competition and we were going to go to the 3rd Naval Air Weapons meet in El Centro. So we send, I think, 6 pilots for competitions, guns, rockets, bombs, and it was all F-9 squadrons from Navy and Marine. During the run-up to that, I didn't get in. I was number 7 or something like that. I was a little upset by the whole thing, but I kind of rationalized it before it came to pass when the young captain that was in it killed himself on the rocket run. That was very easy to do with the rockets that we were fighting. You know, you can get mesmerized, and they always told me. Oh,
yeah. Watch him. Don't watch him.
How not to get mesmerized. Don't watch him.
Don't watch him.
Yeah, I think he was watching him because he killed himself. So I went in his place. It was interesting to go to the Naval Air Weapons Meet. I don't think they do that anymore.
No.
I don't think
so.
I don't know. Do the
that.
Harriers do any shoot-offs?
I don't recall ever doing anything like that.
No.
Yeah.
No. I suspect it's because it's a competition. There may have been a chance to press things a little closer than you maybe oughta to make sure you get better scores.
Without a doubt.
Yes.
Without a doubt. And I wasn't really willing to go there.
Right.
Anyhow, that's why I'm here.
Good. Well, we're glad you are.
Okay. So we've got enough background. I can take you into the Air Force where you tread with care.
Well, and I would love to hear your experience with the Air Force, because I too have an experience with the Air Force. Well, what do you think, RePete? Kind of a breaking point and come back for more?
Yes. Hey, Fig, you got your private pilot rating before you went in the Marine Corps, didn't you?
Yes, I did. And it was a lot of work and a lot of effort because the information I needed wasn't readily available at your fingertips like it is nowadays. It was a lot to get prepared to take my oral and my check ride.
Well, as you know, I got my private certificate in college as well. And here's something that I wish I'd had available when I was working on becoming a private pilot. There's a new podcast perfect for the student pilot or current pilot wanting to refresh their knowledge. It's called the Audio Ground School Podcast. The host, Nick Smith, founded and created the online ground school and student pilot resource website, parttimepilot.com. That's parttimepilot.com. Part-Time Pilot has the sole objective of decreasing student pilots' hurdles when training to become a pilot.
If you check out the podcast, be sure to look in the show notes of each episode, because in them, you'll find video lessons, downloads, and other helpful resources. I highly recommend not only listening to the podcast, but subscribing to it so you can get notified of each episode and keep track of many promotions and scholarships they put out at Part-Time Pilot.
What a great resource for anyone learning to fly, refreshing, or coming up on a biennial flight review. You may remember, I mentioned my son is working on his private pilot certificate. The timing of this couldn't be better. Thank you to Nick over at the Audio Ground School podcast at parttimepilot.com. I'm excited to watch how much easier this will be for him with a great resource like this.
Right.
Hey, and while we're on recommendations, let me take a minute and mention our sponsor, Robin's Bird Brain Designs. She offers a wide range of customization options for their coasters, including squadron logos and call signs, organization logos, and even aircraft instruments. These unique designs are perfect for anyone in the military or aviation industry, or for anyone who appreciates the beauty of these intricate designs.
Their attention to detail and commitment to quality is evident in every piece they create, making their coasters a truly special, one-of-a-kind gift. Whether you're looking for a gift for a friend, family member, or a special way to show appreciation to a colleague or client, Robin's Bird Brain Designs has got you covered.
Their custom etching services are not limited to coasters either. They can also create custom designs on a variety of other items, including plaques, cutting boards, or even a laptop or iPad. Their product customization is perfect for anyone who appreciates the beauty of personalized gifts.
Overall, Robin's Bird Brain Designs is an excellent choice for anyone looking for a unique and thoughtful gift. Their custom etching services are unparalleled, and their commitment to quality and customer satisfaction is second to none.
RobinsBirdBrainDesigns.com. So Fig and you both were Marine pilots and then went over to the dark side.
That's right. So there we were.
I can't wait to hear how this turns out.
All right. It was a good time in my life. I was going to school with a GI Bill, had no money, but good support from my wife's and my parents. So all was good there.
And that was at Purdue? You went to Purdue?
Yes, I went to Purdue. I was in a school where a lot of the astronauts went, aeronautical and engineering science. So I learned to be an aeronautical engineer. I had my first child in Cherry Point Hospital, and that was Scott's brother. We had one child, and we were in Lafayette, Indiana. But I will tell you that the squadron was bouncing for FCLPs when my first child was born, but I kept myself off the schedule.
Nice. Nice.
You wanted to not pay the divorce attorney. I get that.
That's right. She had nothing to say about it. She was very supportive. Anyhow, off to Purdue, and I heard I needed the money, and I figured I had a few years of flying to go, and why not give it a try on the dark side? And I'd heard about the Guard. And what I did is I was 100 miles away from the base, Bearfield, Fort Wayne, Indiana. But that was the wing headquarters and a good squadron. So I went over there and talked to the guys and said, would you take a Marine? He said, we'd take you in a minute. And he actually took two of them at that point. So there was three new guys came. One came from active duty Air Force, and two of us came from the Marines. The other Marine didn't get to know him very well because he didn't last very long. I don't think he really wanted to be there. I don't know why he did it. But in any event, I got in, and I just loved the idea of the whole thing. We could drive up there twice a month and get 4 or 5 days pay. And that was, in those days, that must have been $100, you know.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
What that? About 150, I think, what it was. But anyhow, they had F-84 Fs, which is the so-called Thunderstreak. We never called it that. We called it Hog. And we called it a hog because there was never a runway that an F-84F couldn't use all of for takeoff or landing. It just didn't make any difference what it was. But
they call it Super Hog. I've looked it up. Oh my God.
It's swept wing.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like the F9. It was a tank. It was solid as rock.
Fairchild Republic, right?
Right. And nice big drop tanks on it. Nothing on the tip of the wings. It was a nice airplane, except for taking off and landing.
Just used every bit that you had. Did it fly well? Did it handle?
Oh
well?
Yeah, very, very well. Fly very well. It was nice to be in that because all we did is fly. There's no real significant ground duties. You just fly, and there's some really neat hops that you could get. This squadron did the flyover for the Indianapolis 500 race. And I did that 2 years. I was one of those 4 guys, but that's before they started flying all these airplanes over. They don't do that anymore, but we did that. So there I was. We got a new governor, and we have 26 airplanes, I think. And they line them all up there, and we're going to fly over for the governor. And I looked at those airplanes, and my experience in the Marine Corps, there's no way that there's going to get 80% of those airplanes off the ground because there was no airplanes in the hangar, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So we went out there and got everybody in the airplane, and the F-84 had a shotgun starter. You never find that many APUs, but they had a shotgun shell starter that you put in, and you just hit that thing and it started the engine. And the few things you had to do before. Every one of them started and flew. Just blew my mind.
Wow. I'm gobsmacked that you got that many airplanes. Even in a good squadron with everything up, the odds are not that you're going to get that many airplanes going.
Right.
Yeah. So I get a couple of guys in F-84s and fly out to Cherry Point and land and go into 533. And it says, guess what we did? Those guys. And I told them I was getting more flight hours in those days than they were when I came back.
Yeah.
Because they were rationing gas. We had no problems like that. Anyhow, the interesting thing again, I have to go over here and get a prop that I brought this morning. This prop here is you know what that is? That's a fatigue hat.
I do.
Fatigue hat. And so I had one of those. I told this story so many times that some friends of mine here in Green Valley went out and brought me a couple of these hats. And I tell this story, but you had to be covered to go to the airplane in both services, in the Air Force and the Marine Corps.
On the flight line.
On the flight line. Absolutely.
Okay. Wow.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. You didn't have to do that when you were on the flight line?
No, in fact, it was the exact opposite. You had to be no cover. It was considered FOD.
They were worried about, FOD.
Well, it was.
Foreign object damage. In other words,
it was.
We weren't allowed to have speed lacers on our boots, the little metal things that would hook in, or a cover, i.e. a hat. If wind came along or that little speed lace piece of metal came off, anything that a jet engine could suck up and turn into FOD, foreign object damage a $3 million, $5 million engine in a heartbeat. And
Okay, so there I was flying off a carrier, and I had my hat. Had to wear it on the deck, and sometimes there's a lot of wind and stuff on it, but I had to have, and so really, I love the hat. I must have got it from a gunny from the Second World War or something like that, because it was all beat up and the whole thing. And you'd fold it up and you'd shove it up in the windscreen like that and go flying. But we took off with the canopy open. So I was taking a cat shot off the Lake Champlain, and that cat go right over my shoulder. And I said, oh, shit, my hat. I've lost my hat.
Right.
But 2 weeks later, some plane captain comes over to me, one of our Marine guys. He said, hey, Lieutenant, I found your hat. It was stuck in the back of the canopy of number 11. I said, I had my hat back. That was so great to have my hat. Okay, now we're going to fast forward to the Air Guard. they didn't like me wearing that hat. They wore their piss cutters, and then when there's easy to put those, and maybe they weren't considered FOD, maybe they were. But anyhow, I wore my hat. So first year's summer camp. In a guard summer camp, 2 weeks, wheels up, went up to northern Wisconsin, a little base up there.
Volkfield.
Volkfield. Yeah, we flew off Volkfield, and there's a range out over Lake Michigan, and you did the whole thing. So we went up there, and great flying. Really very good. But I had my hat. But we used to do gunnery out of, I don't know if you did air-to-air gunnery out there over the lake. We did the gunnery over the lake, and this is the first time that I'd have done air-to-air gunnery practice with the Guard or the Air Force. Get out there and brief it, and they get 2 passes with a barrel roll in the middle, and I had never seen that before. So you set up on the perch, and you go down toward the target, and you hop over the target after you get your little 20 millimeters short burst. And then you pull up and do a barrel roll, and you come back around and do it the second time.
Okay.
Did you ever do that?
No, I like that idea, though. I like it a lot.
I thought it was great. I thought it was wonderful because you always had trouble getting enough time on the target. So you got 2 for every time. And then they flew it in a figure 8, so they were always kind of in a turn.
Right.
We came back and we were having, and I was going back after a hard day's flight, and these guys came after me, and they took my hat and they took it over to the campfire and they burned it. That's the saga of the hat.
Oh, that's just wrong.
That is wrong. That's
wrong.
what I say. I had no support at all.
They were threatened by that hat. That hat threatened them. They had to kill that hat.
Absolutely.
I had to kill that. So, okay, that one more. I think we can.
Well, you're starting into that. I'm going to sort of refer to it real quickly. You referred to the piss cutter, and it was referred to once on last week's show, I believe, as well, which was so it's basically. I don't know. Describe the hat for me, Fig. I'm at a loss how to describe. You know what?
It's a brimless. It's a brimless hat.
Yeah, if you're looking on video, I've got one right here.
That's it. That's it. That's it.
It was a brimless hat.
No, you'd never want to
focusing properly, but brimless hat, and
that's great.
It was 2 corners. Instead of a 3-corner hat, it's a 2-corner hat. Front and rear.
That's right. Fore and aft.
Yeah,
fore and aft.
It probably has some foul effort in there as to how it got its name as a piss cutter. But
that's right. So, that's great that you have it. You'd never want to shove that in a windscreen of a airplane you fly with the cockpit open.
No, it would go quickly, especially when the intake is behind your shoulder. Else, it would never come back in one piece.
So we got summer camp. We one of the favorite things we used to do, I lived 100 miles from the base, and I prided myself of getting more time every month than the guys that lived in town. And so that was a main thing we would do. We had a thing. So there I was Friday night in ready room of 163rd Tactical Fighter Squadron, waiting for a couple of my buddies to show up so we could go to Las Vegas. So all of those guys in that squadron, all of them had been through fighter weapons school in Nellis. And so they knew their way around the strip. So they'd love to go out there. So we would fly to Nellis and get out there for the action and then stay up and get some sleep and go to the pool the next day. And then we'd have to get up at 4:00 in the morning so it'd be cool enough to get the F-84 off the ground in Nellis because it was really bad in Nellis. I peeled a tire there one time, and where the Vulcanus comes off. But we were there one night in a bar with the Rat Pack.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You were there. You were there with Frank and Dino
Frank and Dino,
Sammy.
all of them. Yeah, they were there. They didn't care who the hell we were. They were all too drunk to make any difference.
Yeah.
But now my best story for the Air National Guard, and this involves the birth of a Marine fighter pilot.
Okay.
My wife was pregnant for the second time. It was going to be drill weekend, and she was a little behind schedule, and I was concerned about that. But she said, we need the bunny. Why don't you go ahead to drill weekend, and my folks who lived in Chicago will come down and stay here with me. So I said, okay, yeah, that's all right. Who knows when this bundle of joy is going to show up? I went off, and a normal day, I flew once, I think, or twice. And we usually went out to ribs. Fort Wayne's a great place for ribs. But we had a guy in the squadron, an enlisted guy, who was also a disc jockey. And so we always listened to him whenever we were off base because he played the songs we liked, and he was just a contact with where we're at.
Yeah.
So we were just coming back from having ribs and a couple of beers, and we were just in the gate, and the disc jockey said, well, Captain Slaf, please call the duty officer of his squadron.
Ruh-roh.
This is an emergency.
Oh boy.
Well, I knew right then what it was.
Oh,
so I would go down there, and sure enough, Scott has been born in Lafayette, and everybody's healthy and doing fine. And I was wondering how in the heck that word got to me the way it did. My father-in-law, he got a little too excited over this whole thing, and he called the state police, the Indiana State Police, and he says, I need to get in touch with my son-in-law at Bear Field. Can you help us? So what they did is they relayed the call from car to car across the state, and then to the duty officer, and the duty officer calls the radio station, and that's how they got it. So I called home, and everybody was fine. So I was going to get up and go home in the morning and see the kid, and introduce the new Marine.
That's a great story.
But I was sleeping at about 2:00 in the morning, and somebody taps me on the shoulder, and this is the guard. It's the commanding general of our guard wing, saying, I want to make sure everything's all right and anything we can do. And incredible.
Yeah. Well, that's a great story.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I stayed in the Guard until I got my degree. I took a job working basically the Air Force as a consultant to the Air Force in the Pentagon. When I told my Guard commander that I'm out of there and I got this job, he says, where are you going? I said, I'm going to the Pentagon. He said, you got to go see my buddy. He runs the F-100 squadron out there. So, well, I was getting to the point where maybe I'd had enough. I left the squadron, and 1 month later, 2 weeks later, I think, they got called up. They got activated, and that would have been me if it was happened 2 weeks sooner. And they went to the Berlin crisis of 1961 in Germany, took the airplanes and went there. So I never went to see the F-100 guy. Fortunately, I decided to get a master's degree instead. The company was going to pay for it, so I decided to do that instead of fly anymore. And that squadron got activated also, so I would have been caught either way.
Yeah.
So anyhow, it was a very good experience. I flew in that Guard squadron for essentially 3 years. The squadron never had a mishap. Won what's called the Spats Trophy 2 years in a row. Spats Trophy honors the best Guard squadron in the country.
Wow.
And we won it.
Well, that's impressive.
2 years in a row. We had to share it with another squadron the first year, but the second year we got it all by ourselves. But if we would have busted up one of those airplanes, we would have never got it.
Wow.
So that's where I was.
Nice.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. I have to ask, and I think it was probably different, but I want to hear from you. The transition, from active duty Marine Corps into the Air Guard. I don't want to taint the waters because I got my take on it. But was it a culture, kind of a culture shock for you when you the way they treat you, the way they operate?
The way they operate, it was more than a cultural shock, because it was a technical shock. Being a carrier aviator and flying all those flat patterns, to come up with the way the Air Force lands, it really was very hard to get used to. They fly square patterns at 500 feet. I mean, 500 feet, you make a square, and then you get up there, and you make an airline approach, and you turn on the landing lights. It blinds you every time.
Right.
And that's what's done. But no culture shock with the capability of the pilots. These guys all wanted to be there. And I was among the group that were coming from out of town. So we were making a special effort. We had about, I think, 4 or 5 guys that would come from Indianapolis, and that's an hour drive.
Yeah.
And I was coming from an hour, and there were some people that come from the small towns. Yeah. And that was my inner circle. So it was very pleasant, and they all like to hear the carrier stories.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. Well, I was referring to maybe the difference in military bearing, with the way the troops interacted with the officers and that sort of thing in the Guard, as opposed to active duty Marine Corps.
Yes, you see, I did that tour on a Navy ship. So I was intermixed with the Swabbies.
You were I
were indoctrinated.
Yes.
There you go.
And you know what? That's a very good, my last 3 years on active duty, I was at a Navy base. I was at Kingsville. So I had kind of come, and then I transitioned to the Guard from there. So you're right. It is kind of a good segue.
There you go. Completely different cultures, but slowly got across to them. So
yes.
But service indeed, and thank you to all of them who served, regardless.
That's right.
Everybody who stepped up.
That's right.
Signed their name on the dotted line and signed their name on the blank check to protect and defend the Constitution. Right. So thank you for your service.
Yeah, it was great. The way I did it, when they played the anthems of all of the services, I get to stand up 3 times.
Exactly. And you did indeed stand up. And as you mentioned pre-show, I hope you don't mind me mentioning it, you're going to be 89 next week.
That's right.
Incredible. Yeah.
That is incredible. So, I pray to God that I'm half as sharp as you at the age of 89, and that I make it to the age of 89. This has been a true privilege, and we appreciate the time.
Thanks, guys, for helping me record it. It's just a pleasure to see what you guys are doing, and that you're having so much fun at it.
I can't tell you how what an honor it is to get stories, to hear stories from the actual source, and
exactly.
And thank you for that, and thank you for your service.
Well, thank you guys for doing what you do, and glad you survived the Harrier.
As are we. So.
Yeah.
We got a couple other thank yous we need to put out there. First of all, Fig, first and foremost, who gets us there?
We got to thank Dave Hamilton, my man Dave Hamilton. Thank you, Dave.
Over at the Mac Geek Gab and the Business Brain Podcast and the Gig Gab as well for musicians. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate what you do for us. Thanks also to Robbins Bird Brain Designs, our sponsor, and parttimepilot.com with the Audio Ground School podcast. Appreciate you sharing your podcast stories with us, and we're sharing them with everyone else. Also, if you want to reach out to us and ask us any questions, particularly about becoming a pilot, I don't care if you're 14 or 40 and you want to become a pilot, get out there and do it. Go over to the airport and start doing it. If you've got questions about that, write first of all to Sticks at SoThereIWas.us. Any other questions or feedback? Feel free to write Sticks or Fig at SoThereIWas.us or RePete at SoThereIWas.us. Also, there's, let's see, we got Robbins Bird Brain Designs and the folks that you were starting to hear in the background who give the Air Force a good name. Who's that, Fig?
That's the Dos Gringos.
Man, those guys are awesome. They were a lot of fun to have on. They're amazing musicians, very talented, very clever and creative. We appreciate that. We have a glossary page up. I've since the beginning of this episode put up piss cutter. Is now on the glossary page.
Excellent.
And we've got to get some others up there as well, but we're getting some admin help from Styx on updating the glossary page. And we have a sponsors page and a subscribe page. So go to sotherewas.us/subscribe and find us on your favorite method of listening to podcasts, be it Stitcher, iHeart, Spotify, any one of them. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find a subscribe button there for us. And in the meantime, thanks for joining us. Stay safe and check 6.
Well, there I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fond of all the shit I was wearing on that day. Now an F-16 is cramped enough, but it's even worse with all that stuff supposed to save your life. But we knew there was no way. 'Cause when you're going down in the North Atlantic, man, it's over.
It's over.